16. The governor of Puerto Rico, Ricardo Rossello, joins me now. Governor, thanks so much for being with us. When you read that tweet this morning, the President of the United States, of which Puerto Rico is part, saying that 3,000 Puerto Ricans did not die as a result of Hurricane Maria, what went through your mind?
Well, Anderson, first thing was that the victims nor the people of Puerto Rico deserve to have their pain questioned. This has been a long process. As you know, we didn't have a lot of the resources to make an accurate count in the onset. That is why I worked so that we could have an independent and scientifically robust effort taken about with George Washington. And as a scientist, I can tell you that with the limitations that we had, it is a very thorough, it is a very accurate estimate. And recognizing that it can only be an estimate at this point, I decided to put it as the official figure because we believe in it. So certainly, in our view, there is a lot of pain. The moment right now is not to have political bickering or, to argue about other things that are not important, but rather to focus on, on the pain and remember those who lost their lives, and to focus on rebuilding the future.
Have you heard from people in Puerto Rico who have lost loved ones? Because I just can't imagine what somebody who has lost a loved one in the wake, whether it's a month or 2 months or 3 months after the storm, because they didn't have electricity or they couldn't get their regular medication, they didn't have access to medical facilities or to their regular doctor, to be told by the President of the United States that that person did not die, that your loved one did not die as a result of the storm. To me, it seems just incredibly disrespectful, not only to the dead, but to the families of those whose lives have been forever changed.
Well, it is painful. It is painful for all the families. And certainly that is why we wanted to have the most robust investigation possible, so that we could get some clarity and we could get some a moment to remember all of those that passed on. This has been the most devastating event in the modern history of the United States. And with that, I take a moment to send our thoughts and prayers, obviously, to the people of the Carolinas and the United States. We know what they're about to go through. So right now, obviously painful, and we are confident that the estimates and the work that that the George Washington University did are actually accurate.
Governor, I know you're in a difficult position because you still need the help of President Trump. You still need to be in his good graces for the future of Puerto Rico. But the President of the United States is saying this was not the catastrophe that you have just said it was, that we witnessed, that everybody knows it to be. The President of the United States is not saying that, is saying 3,000 people did not die as a result of this storm. In fact, when he was there with you in those days, he said he talked about Hurricane Katrina as being a real catastrophe. The implication being was that what happened in Puerto Rico was not a real catastrophe. And you could say, well, that was just ignorance in the early days because the death toll was only at that point 16 or 17 people. But right now, more than a year later, he is denying the reality of what happened. I know you need to keep him in your good graces because you're in a difficult position. I just find that stunning. Do you have any reason to doubt this study? Because it's not just this study by George Washington University that the government of Puerto Rico spent tens of thousands of dollars on, that it took months to do. It's not just a study by Harvard and universities in Puerto Rico, which did surveys months earlier, which also came up with a death toll in this range. It's not just reporting by CNN and others who interviewed funeral directors. I mean, there is study after study on this, and they are scientifically sound studies.
Right. You're right on, Anderson. There is no reason to doubt the validity of these studies. There is no reason to expect that, even though it's an estimate, that it's not far away from what the accurate toll should be. This is a scientifically robust effort, and I completely support the conclusions, both signaling that we need to make changes at the local level and at the federal level to have a better response towards the future. And regarding, the relationship with the White House and looking forward towards rebuilding the future, I'm hopeful that we can continue on the relationship because this is about helping over 3 million American citizens that have been significantly affected. In my view, my role, Anderson, is to point out what has been good, but also to signal what has been wrong. And in this case, neglecting the facts about the level of the death toll, how it came about, the reality of the devastation that we lived in Puerto Rico is just simply inaccurate, and I will continue on to signal on that. I feel that if we have that sort of relationship when we can speak truthfully, if we can have transparency and, of course, have this open lines of communication with the American public, we can start a rebuilding process that is to the benefit of Puerto Rico, but also recognizing that if people are irate, are angry at the unequal treatment, at the second-class citizenship treatment that the people of Puerto Rico received relative to, other states, then you need to look no further than the reality that Puerto Rico is a colonial territory, that we don't have the rights to voting members in Congress, that we don't have the rights to vote for the president. And we really need to ask ourselves as a nation, if we are to be the standard bearers of democracy everywhere else in the world, how can we go to Venezuela? How can we go to Cuba and preach democracy when we're not really, acting upon it in our own backyard? So my petition to everybody seeing this is, if we want to manage and if we want to handle the inequality issue that's at play, we need to strike at the root of the problem, and that is that Puerto Rico is a colonial territory, and until that problem is solved, we will always be treated as second-class citizens.
Well, we're certainly seeing that with the president's tweet today. And just very briefly, the president also says this is basically a plot by the Democrats. There's absolutely no reason for him to say that. Just for the record, this study by GW, in your opinion, was this a plot by Democrats or something involving Democrats to somehow make the president look bad?
Well, no, other than the fact that I am a Democrat, this was an independent commission report. It's a highly reputable, academic institution. The instructions were clear to them. You make those results public at the same time that you give us, the government of Puerto Rico, those results, so that there can be transparency and that we can have, we can move forward and see how we can fix or how we can mitigate towards the future. I need to stress again, Anderson, my professional, formation is as a scientist. So once the study was unveiled, I went through the process. I saw what they did. And it was very, very important data. I mean, important data that showcased how if you were, for example, somebody that was poor or lived in poor areas of Puerto Rico, you were more likely to be in an area with excess deaths. Or if you were older than 65, you were also more likely, to experience the excess deaths. So I thought it was a well-done experiment and process. I think that the results are scientifically robust, and so much so that I decided to make the official tally change to that estimate, to the 2,975, so that we can have we can have at least a fair view of what occurred here in Puerto Rico, and start working towards fixing what was wrong, both at the local level and at the federal level. So that in the event of another storm or another catastrophe, an earthquake, for example, we can respond much, much better.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's stunning that we're even having this conversation today of all days, but that we're even have to have this conversation given what we saw in Puerto Rico and given, the